Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And judging by our performance over the first month of this 2028 season, the answer is trending towards definitely not. A 9-20 record for these A's, the worst record in all of baseball. We have gotten a little bit unlucky, but we're still definitely not a good team. Hopefully, the month of May will be better. One positive is that we have got a better performance thus far this season than I anticipated from the import from Japan, who we signed as a free agent this past off season, Hidero Endo. I've been very concerned about his poor contact, his brutal speed, and his free swinging ways, which will lead to an insane number of strikeouts. And those things have certainly all factored into his statistics. He struck out in well over 40% of his at bats, but he still is hitting 237 with an 859 OPS, a 136 WRC plus, and a WAR of 0.7 1 month into the season. I do not think he's going to keep hitting at a 237 pace, but I will admit that if he can keep his batting average in the 230s with the power that he's demonstrated, on pace for 45, 50 home runs, if he can bat in the 230s with that type of production, he will be a very useful player and a bargain for us. But despite his excellent start to the season and excellent start to his career in the United States, the team overall has been disappointing, and hopefully we can play better here in the month of May. And we split our first 4-game series of the month of May with the Baltimore Orioles, lost the first 2, and then came back to win the final 2. So that's a good start, given that the Orioles are still one of the strongest teams in baseball. Unfortunately, lost another player to the IL, center fielder Luis Lara, going to be out with an oblique strain for the next couple of weeks. And Brian Rincon just turned from the injured list, and we had to make a move given that Darrell Hernandez is now healthy as well. Kind of hinted that this was the direction we were thinking at the end of the last episode, and we did end up trading away Jaime Candelario and Ahmed Rosario. Got a minor league pitcher, Bradley Hodges, in return, 24-year-old. Looks like he is a very marginal major league player, but at least we got a little bit in return, someone who's under team control with 3 option years left, and seems like we're getting more committed to Mr. Endo by the minute with Candelario now off our roster. And the first week of May was a winning week, 4-3 record overall after we took 2 out of 3 in San Diego. Back in the division for the next week and a half at Seattle, and then home against Houston before going back on the road at Texas. So not expecting us to be extremely competitive this year, but certainly these next 9 games against divisional rivals could at least get us bordering on respectability in the division, and we could potentially get by both the Rangers and the Angels in the standings if we play particularly well. You can see Endo now 3rd in the National League, or the American League, with 9 homers, has the batting average up to a blistering 241. And it was a decidedly mediocre week for our Oakland A's. We lost the series in Seattle, but we did win the series in Houston. So a 3-3 week for this Oakland team is actually fine. We have a winning record for the month of May, halfway through the month. Granted, it's just barely a winning record with a 7-6 record thus far this month, but certainly pretty significant progress compared to where we were just a couple of weeks ago. Did just have some more bad news in terms of injuries, though. Christian Walker, the first baseman / designated hitter who's playing for us against left-handed pitching and is the only captain personality left after the injury that Mr. Spence suffered. Leaves us now without a captain personality on the team unless we are to bring up Brian Buelvis, which is certainly possible. Walker has actually been incredibly productive for us playing against lefties, 353 average and a 190 WRC plus. The only disappointing thing is it's only over 34 at-bats since we haven't faced too many lefties here in the early going of this season. And unfortunately, the good feelings thus far in the month of May came to an end when we lost 4 in a row. But after that, we have won the final 2 to take the series at home against Detroit. Got games against the Rockies, the Tigers again on the road, and then on the road against the Orioles before we get to the end of the month of May. One good piece of news, Luis Lara, our center fielder, is ready to come off of the IL today. We had Jorge Ruiz up, and Ruiz did a respectable job hitting 273, but no extra base hits, and only a 66 WRC plus. He's a guy that we picked up right before the trade deadline with the Angels last year. Forget who it was we traded away. Oh, it was Josh Spores was the key guy that we included in the deal to bring Ruiz back, who is certainly not a big-time prospect for us. We'll be sending him back down to AAA and get Mr. Lara right back into the starting lineup for us. And unfortunately, the final week plus of the month of May was not a good one. We were swept in a 2-game series against the Rockies. We did split a 4-game series in Detroit, but then we lost 2 out of 3 in Baltimore. So certainly a better month in May than in April, but that is not saying much at all. As we sit here on June 1st, 12 and a half games behind in the AL West, still in last place, and the only team in baseball that we are better than is the New York Yankees. Mr. Endo does continue to hit home runs. The batting average has dipped a bit down to 226, but still has a 136 WRC plus and a 1.1 WAR 2 months into the season. Did get a piece of bad news for our already ragtag pitching staff. Luis Garcia out with a fractured shoulder for the rest of the year. He was a minor league free agent signing. He had not been good, 2-6 record with a 6.04 ERA, but his Sierra was 3.62. Don't know exactly who's going to replace him, but he has likely pitched his last game in Oakland here in his second time with the Oakland A's. And wanted to note that Mr. Endo did win the American League Rookie of the Month for the month of May. Hit just 214, but did add another 8 home runs and 20 ribbies to his tally for the year. So a nice productive month for him. Taking a look at the pitching staff with the departure of Garcia, we've moved Hunter Brown into the rotation, and we promoted Jesus Soto from AAA. And Soto now gives us a very evenly split bullpen with 4 lefties and 4 righties out there, which gives our manager a lot more options given that we've got still 5 righties in the starting rotation. And to start off the month of June, we took the first 2 games of a 4-game homestand against the lowly Yankees. Thought that if there's any team we'd be able to win a series against, it was probably them. Unfortunately, the Yankees rallied to beat us in 12 on Saturday and then took a 1-run game yesterday. So even against the Yankees, the best we could do is a split. Taking a look at our stats as we sit here on June 5th, you can see after that awful start in April, we've just been mediocre since then with a 14-18 record in May and the early stages of June. 12th in the league in runs scored. We are really good at drawing walks, still ranked 3rd in that. The pitching has improved a little bit to 10th in the league in runs allowed. Certainly not a good team, but our Pythagorean record of 26-35 is 3 games better than we've performed. So I won't say there's any real reason for optimism, but I think there's reason to think that we're not as bad as we look. Certainly the 0-6 record in extra inning games and the 4-13 record in one-run games are trends that I would think would start normalizing more towards a 50-50 split over time. And you may remember that in the offseason we took a flyer on a trade for Tim Herron, who was recovering from a serious injury. Unfortunately, the injury has gotten worse, and his career is over. So at the age of 31, we thought he might be a left-handed arm that could help us in the second half of the year. But instead, Mr. Herron's career is over. So wasn't going to be a big part of our future at his age, but did feel like since we didn't have to give up that much for him, it was worth rolling the dice that maybe he'd help us a little bit this year. And his arbitration number next year was not supposed to be extreme. But given that his career is now over, a risk that we took, not a huge financial risk because the Braves did retain 75% of his salary, but it will end up paying no dividends at all for the Oakland Athletics. And as the month of June has continued, kind of been a Oakland A's kind of month. We took a 2-game series against the Angels. Then we proceeded to split a series with the Astros. Took 2 out of 3 on the road in Seattle, and we just lost 2 out of 3 on the road against Minnesota. So heading into the last couple weeks of the season, we'll be home against the Blue Jays, home against the Twins, and home against the Red Sox. A nice 9-game homestand before we finish off the month back against the Blue Jays, but in Toronto. And we split the first 2 games of our homestand against the Blue Jays, both shutouts. We won 3-0 and then lost 1-0. But if these A's didn't have bad luck with injuries, we would not have any luck at all. Shortstop Cameron Cawley ruptured MCL. He is going to be out for 9 months, so likely will be missing most of spring training next year. Really like his glove, really like his speed, but in his injury-shortened and significantly impacted career in the majors, he's demonstrated a significant struggle hitting the ball. Just a 195 average this year and 236 at-bats. 60 WRC plus. Still put up a 1.1 WAR by virtue of his nice glove, but he will be gone for the rest of this season. Still hope at some point we'll see him for the full year, but at this point he may be more someone who we're thinking about in a platoon or utility infielder role, although we love the glove, and as I said, we love the speed. 6 for 6 stealing bases this year. He just has not been able to consistently get above the Mendoza line at the major league level in terms of his batting average. And as we head into our final game of the month of June, it's been kind of win one and lose one. We lost 2 out of 3 in Toronto, or against Toronto at home. Won 2 out of 3 at home against Minnesota, lost 2 out of 3 at home against Boston, and we just took the first game of the road trip against Toronto, final game against the Blue Jays today. 35-48 record. We're in 4th place now in the division, so we're improving a little bit. We're better than the Rangers. We're much better than the Yankees. We're getting close to the Blue Jays. We're much better than the Royals. Kind of at a similar spot as teams like the Marlins, but we are a little better than Cardinals, better than Pittsburgh, better than San Francisco. So we're not as embarrassing as we have been midway through the season. Hidero Endo tied for second in the league in home runs. Batting average has dipped to 212, but he does have 22 homers and 52 ribbies on the year. He is striking out in almost half of his at-bats, 128 strikeouts in 264 at-bats. WRC plus down to 120, and the WAR still at 1.1, so he's basically been a replacement level player over the month of June. So things not going perfectly, but he's still been one of our more productive offensive players, which probably says more about our offense than it does about Endo. You may remember from the start of the series, we turned over a ton of our coaches, so we're going to have a lot of coaching decisions to make this season. Mid-season review of goals, not that positive. Not pleased with our record, not pleased we haven't brought in a top player, not pleased with our attendance, not pleased with fan interest, and not pleased with what we've done with international amateur fines. So we're pretty much failing at just about anything, worried about our progress towards the goals, although for some reason he says he's good with our overall performance. Final evaluation at the end of the season, and hopefully we can do better over the last 3 months of the year than we have over these first 3 months of this season. And we lost the final game of the month of June, but still finished June with a winning record, 14-13. We've dipped to 14th in the American League in runs scored. We've improved to 9th in runs allowed, so the pitching getting a little better, the hitting getting a little worse. The overall record is a couple games below Pythagorean expectations, so again, it's not horrible, but it's not good. At some point, we're going to have to be able to be better than not horrible, and we haven't gotten to that point quite yet. 10.5 out of the wild cards, so we are at best on the periphery of the playoff race. Certainly think it's conceivable that we could get up to third in the division this year, which is where we were a year ago, only half a game behind the Angels at this point, but certainly has not been a great season by any measure. And we'll take a quick look at our roster here now that we are past the midway point of the season. Mason Miller, 4-5 with a 3.31 ERA. 84 strikeouts, 3.96 Sierra, 1.4 WAR. He's been fine, not exceptional, but fine. Bubba Chandler, disappointing first full year in Oakland, 3-6 with a 5.10 ERA. Hopefully we can get more out of him. He could be an important part of our future. Kyle Bradish, who we picked up in that trade with Baltimore, has been our best pitcher. 6-6 with a 2.72 ERA, a significant improvement compared to what he had done the last couple of years in Baltimore. So he has been an important addition to our rotation. Hunter Brown went into the rotation when we've had the most recent injury, 2-5, but a solid 3.42 ERA. And then Emmett Sheehan, who we picked up off the waiver wire, has been pretty disastrous. 3-10 record, 5.50 ERA, 11 homers and 34 walks allowed in 75 and a third innings pitched. So some of his secondary numbers are a bit more solid. 106 fit minus, 380 Sierra, and even a 0.7 WAR. So perhaps he's gotten a little bit unlucky, but he certainly hasn't been great. Chase Lee, as our closer, has 20 saves, 3.15 ERA. He's been respectable. Ben Leeper's been respectable as a setup man. Jacob Mizorowski has been better of late, but still has an ERA of close to 5. Kyle Nelson, 232 ERA, striking out more than a batter per inning. Bennett Souza and Jesus Soto, lefties out of the pen, have not been great. Clark Schmidt has been respectable as a long reliever. And Angel Perdomo, the Rule 5 acquisition, has been pretty strong as a lefty specialist with a 2.67 ERA for us in 27 innings of work this season. Turning to our everyday players, the catching platoon has not been good. Drake Baldwin hitting just .218, does have 7 homers and 14 doubles and 220 at-bats, so a 96 WRC plus, 1.1 WAR for our starting catcher, but we're hoping he would be more the player we saw offensively in the second half of 2026 when we first brought him over. Will Banfield, who is playing against left-handed pitching primarily, hitting just a .134, a sickly 2 WRC plus. Despite his solid defense, he's been below replacement level. Maybe time for us to think about moving on from Mr. Banfield. Hard to imagine anyone in the lineup could be less effective than he has been. Tyler Soderstrom doing a good job for us as our first baseman against right-handed pitching. .263 average, 17 homers, 40 ribbies, 115 WRC plus. He is essentially in a platoon with Christian Walker, although Walker really isn't playing in the field much. Back from that injury now, hitting .295 with a 152 WRC plus. Has not played too much since he got back, only 3 games. Darrell Hernandez off of the IL where he finished last year, hitting .253 with a 78 WRC plus. He is a respectable major leaguer, nothing more, nothing less. Eddie's Leonard has really struggled, and given that he's primarily played against left-handed pitching where he should be solid, that's disappointing. Batting average is a .169, 28 WRC plus. He's more than a win below replacement level. Max Muncy finally brought him back up after we traded away Candelario, and then Cawley had that season-ending injury. He's hitting .211 in 19 at-bats after putting up some pretty solid numbers in AAA where he really doesn't have much left to prove. We've talked about Hidero Endo. Batting average is down to .209, WRC plus down to 117. That said, he still has 22 homers and 52 ribbies, 132 strikeouts in 268 at-bats. So just barely avoiding striking out in half of his major league at-bats. The trend in terms of his splits is not particularly favorable. Hit .244 in the month of April, dipped to .214 in May, and then continued to plummet to 176 in June. You can see his OPS pluses, his WRC pluses, his OPS, all exhibiting negative trends over the course of the season. That said, he's still one of our most productive offensive players. Brian Rincon hitting just a .199. This one has been a disappointment after he put up a 113 WRC plus as a rookie a year ago. The offense just has not been there from him. His profile, particularly against right-handed pitchers where he potentially can draw an insane number of walks, is not bad for the switch-hitting infielder who's taken over at shortstop with the injury to Cawley. But the bat has been a problem for Mr. Rincon this year. And as we've talked through a lot of the players on our team, that's a common theme, unfortunately. Hunter Goodman, .240 average, but does have 8 homers and 16 ribbies and 104 at-bats. So a 109 WRC plus for the veteran outfielder. Ketel Marte has been disappointing, hitting just .242, does have 13 doubles, 8 homers, and 41 ribbies, but only an 84 WRC plus. So he's been basically a replacement level player. Certainly not what we envisioned when we were paying him $8 million. who knows about those team options next year at the age of 35 with the way he's played thus far. Luis Lara hitting just 214, 66 WRC plus, another guy who's basically been replacement level for us. And then Lawrence Butler, the right fielder, hitting just 234, does have 9 homers, 12 doubles, 16 steals on the year, and he has been perfectly league average in terms of his OPS plus and his WRC plus here in 2028. So certainly a lot of holes in the lineup. Not going to be hard to improve this team. I think the question is it worth trying to try hard to improve, given that we are headed for a 5th consecutive losing record, a 5th consecutive year out of the playoffs. If we can improve the team on the margin, I think we'd happily do it, as long as we don't really have to give up any significant resources for our future to make it happen. Who knows? I don't think I'm going to go crazy as the trade deadline approaches, but as I said, if there's an opportunity to make us better and it's cheap and it's not a long-term commitment, might as well try to be as competitive as possible. And the month of July has not gone particularly well for our Oakland A's. We did win 3 of the first 4 games of the month, but since then we've lost 4 out of 5. Just a lone win in 4 games against Kansas City, and we lost the first game of a 4-game homestand against the Mariners. 3 left against the White Sox before the All-Star break, when we'll mercifully get some time off. Taking a look at the standings here as we sit here on July 11th, we have moved up to 3rd in the division. That's driven more by the Angels losing 5 in a row than anything particularly special that we have done. Still 16 games out in the division, still one of the worst teams in baseball, so certainly not going to be celebrating that we've got up to 3rd in the division ahead of the awful Angels and the bad Rangers. And we have made it, fortunately, to the first-year player draft, where our Oakland A's will be picking 2nd overall. We had the 4th worst record in baseball last year, got a little bit lucky in the draft lottery held during the winter meetings last December, and as I noted, we'll be picking 2nd overall, so that will put us in a position where we're going to be able to get anyone except one player in this draft pool who will be presumably picked by the Yankees ahead of us. We'll take a look at a few of the top players around. We'll start off looking at the top pitchers. Josh Mangano, a pretty interesting high school starter. Like the durability, like that he's a ground baller who's already throwing in the mid to high 90s, like some of the personality traits. Only a 3-pitch guy, and if that change doesn't develop, probably going to be difficult for him to be an effective major league starter. Devin Argueta, 18-year-old, looks like he can be a bit above average in everything. Another guy who may only be a 3-pitch pitcher when all is said and done. Juan Amarias, 22-year-old out of the University of Virginia. Stuff looks pretty average, but really good movement on his pitches, potentially above average control. Could have 4 above average major league pitchers if all works out well for him. Alan Walling, getting into the players that our manager, or more accurately scout, thinks are 5-star guys. Extreme ground ball tendencies, a 22-year-old out of the University of Southern Indiana. Only throws in the low 90s, potentially a 3 to 4 pitch arsenal, most likely probably a 3, because not sure how good that changeup's going to be. Looks like he could be a bit above average in everything, but honestly, for a college player, especially with the 2nd overall pick, would tend to hope that perhaps someone is a little more developed than he is. Luis Reveles, a high schooler, 18 years old, could have outstanding stuff, above average movement and exceptional control. The question is whether he ends up with a 2-pitch arsenal, a 3-pitch arsenal, a 4-pitch arsenal. Also fragile already physically. Jaheim Penniman, plus stuff, or well above average stuff, plus movement, above average control, some positive personality traits, potentially a 6-pitch arsenal, and honestly, 5 of those pitches are already not that far off major league quality. Probably one of the cleaner pitching prospects we've seen, 18-year-old throwing in the mid-90s, ground ball or pitcher type, ground ball tendencies. Certainly an interesting prospect. Chris Patterson, starting pitcher. Think that his stuff, his movement and control could all be excellent. 19-year-old ground ball tendencies, throwing in the mid to high 90s, like the high work ethic. Question is whether he ends with a 2, 3, or 4-pitch arsenal. And then Steve Genis, potentially outstanding stuff, above average movement, well above average control, 18-year-old, potentially a 6-pitch arsenal, looking for crazy money, high adaptability, a little bit greedy. Another couple college guys to just check in on. I know some of you are very big on them. Jeremy Martin is a guy that I think we looked at previous episode that some of you were pretty interested in, coming out of Indiana. Looks like he could be a bit above average in everything. His stuff, his movement and control, if he fully develops. Potentially a 4-pitch guy at the major league level. And then Jeff Layden, 18-year-old, is a little further along, although he's a high school guy rather than a college guy. Couple negative personality traits. He's really a reliever, so not really all that interesting. Don't know if there's any must drafts here, but certainly an interesting batch of pitchers for us to think about. And we'll do the same thing with the batters that we did with the pitchers, move from the 4.5-star prospects up to the 5-star prospects. Shortstop Mike Little out of Hofstra. Almost has the Hidero Endo profile, but a little better contact, a little better potentially at avoiding strikeouts. But everything else is pretty solid if he completely develops. Does have high adaptability and work ethic, decent speed, excellent infield range, and not looking for a ton of money. Not a horrible prospect given the luck that we've had with Endo and some similarities between the two of them. Ben Giddens, a second baseman out of UCF. Very good contact, very good gap power, very good speed. Doesn't necessarily have a great defensive position, but a lot of very positive personality traits for Giddens. Bobby Cabral, a right fielder, potentially tremendous power. Another guy who's going to struggle to make contact, competent defensively. Steve Brown, the last of the 4.5-star prospects. Another guy with really good power, pretty solid eye, competent corner outfielder. Quality Brown, what a nickname. And now moving into the 5-star prospects. Terrell Stomer, a second baseman, another guy with just potentially incredible power. A lot of big home run bats in this draft. Not great defensively, not a ton of speed. Daegu Otani is his nickname. Jimmy Simpson, a center fielder, another guy. A lot of home run power potentially in this draft. Looks more like a corner outfielder than a center fielder to me. Bubba Murray, a second baseman, another guy with the power and the eye, Below average contact, going to strike out a lot. We've seen a fair amount of similar profiles in the top of this draft. Catcher Mitch McLaren, average defensive catcher, but potentially plus contact and really good home run power. Mike Geisel, first baseman, really good eye, good contact, good power, not much defensively. He's your prototypical first baseman. And then a couple of third basemen. Joe Gearhart, pretty well balanced profile with exceptional power. Like the durability, kind of all over with some of his personality traits. He's either really good or really bad at everything. Good with his adaptability and his intelligence. Bad with his leadership, loyalty, work ethic, and financial ambition for the Sandman. And last but not least, Dan Donahue, or Donahue. Really good contact hitter, potentially plus power, not much speed, competent defensively. Gotta be honest, I don't love the draft. You look at the star ratings, and there's a lot of very interesting players, and we'll probably get a pretty interesting player in the second round as well. But there's not necessarily anyone who completely jumps off the page to me as a must-have. If you've got any thoughts on who you'd go with the second overall pick, if there's a player that I haven't dug into that's interesting that you think is worth taking a look at, would love to hear that as well. Going to have some interesting decisions to make. As I said, there's no one that just blows me away. Normally, if you have a first, second, third kind of overall pick, you hope that there's like 2 or 3 guys that just stand out, and you can kind of pick amongst them. I'm sure when I spend some more time with the draft, I'll get to that point and feel that way about it. But right now, there's a lot of guys I like. No one that I fell in love with upon that initial review. But there is time for that to change as I spend time with the game and these prospects offline. And I know that some of you will have some thoughts that you'll share with me on which direction that we should go as well. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.